We are about to embark on an immersive journey through the corridors of our minds. Stand by as we prepare for departure.
Welcome aboard, everyone, to the Productivity with Peace of Mind podcast adventure. Our journey will begin in just a moment. Inhale deeply and exhale. Our voyage takes us on a captivating tour, diving deep into the intricate layers of our thoughts and imagination. Brace yourselves for the complexities of our evolution. For a safe and enjoyable journey, stay seated. Secure your helmet and protective goggles, and keep hands, feet, and legs inside while the ride is moving. Now relax and enjoy.
What if I told you that even if you've been experiencing any kind of mental or cognitive decline or slowness, or you just feel like, gosh, I just can't do that as well or as fast as I used to, that might not be permanent and that there's something you can do. I'm joined by a very special guest today who talks to us about managing our brain health to improve our energy and what we're able to do and output every day so that we can feel more productive, more balanced, and more at peace with where we're at. And the thing here, the biggest takeaway is that we never have to settle, and there's always something we can do. There are certain things out of our control, but there are still things that we can do. And that is what I found so empowering. So, this is definitely an episode where you are going to want to get out pen and paper and take some notes and listen closely. So, without further ado, we'll go to the conversation. Today, we have with us Eric Collett, Principal and CEO of A Mind for All Seasons, expert in dementia care, brain health, and leadership strategies with over 2 decades of experience. He's known for breaking down complex topics into actionable and relatable insights, which I really love because sometimes these things are just so complex and complicated. And it's like, okay, how does this apply to me? Or like, what do I actually need to know? So I love that you do that. So welcome, Eric. We are so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here. And we're going to talk about how our brain health influences our energy, productivity, and that peace of mind part. So when we talk about productivity with peace of mind, without the peace of mind, productivity doesn't mean a whole lot because we're not feeling very good while we're doing it. And we're going to talk about practical steps to improve cognitive function and our mental well-being. So we're going to start, Eric, on understanding brain health. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the basics around this cellular engine in our mind and how that works.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that intro. And the first thing that I think your listeners would benefit from knowing is that brain health is never about one thing. It's
Yeah.
multifactorial. Sometimes people say, so is it about hormones? Yes. Is it about what I eat? Absolutely. It's about exercise. Uh-huh. And the list could go on. It's about all of that stuff. The
Yes.
body is a system of systems. It all works together. But I want to give you a simple analogy to understand something about how cells work. And this actually affects every cell in the body. But if we understand this, then it unlocks some things that we can do in our lives to get better results. I think most people are familiar with steamships that crisscrossed the waters of the world back in the 1800s and 1900s. And on those steamships, there was an engine room. And in that engine room, you'd see a coal-fired furnace, and there was a guy shoveling coal in. And the faster he shoveled the coal in, the faster the steamship could go. Now, there are three things that have to be true for that guy to keep doing his job. Number one, you have to feed him regularly. Number two, you have to keep him hydrated. That's a really hot place. And if he loses enough fluids, he's going to
Yeah.
drop. And number three, you have to have a ventilation system that works because if that exhaust backs up, he's going to drop dead of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Mm.
Okay, so now think about that engine room is like every cell in the body. And the guy shoveling the coal in the furnace are like mitochondria, are energy producers. Every cell of the body has between about 200 and 2,000 mitochondria, depending on the kind of cell. So if it's a muscle cell or a brain cell where the energy requirements are really high, you're going to have a lot more mitochondria, at least if it's a healthy cell. In the cell, you have to have the same three conditions for it to work correctly. You've got to get fuel to the mitochondria to turn it into energy. So, what we eat and how it's getting to us matters.
Mm.
Hydration matters a whole lot, and that includes electrolyte balance. I've worked with people where they drank so much that they diluted their salts to the point that they were hallucinating.
Oh
You
my.
can die from drinking too much water. So, you've got to have proper hydration. Number three, if the exhaust of the cellular engine is backing up, then energy production drops. Now, just living produces exhaust in all the cells of the body. And sometimes you might refer to it as oxidative stress. Sometimes you might call it reactive oxygen species. We're basically talking about the same kind of thing. And if our body is struggling to clear that oxidative stress, then energy production goes down. So, for example, have you ever gone on a trip where maybe you spend a lot of time inside, you're working in an office, you're not getting out quite as much, and you go on a trip to some sunny place and you go sit on the beach somewhere, and 2 hours later you feel wiped out and you're thinking, I didn't do anything. I was just sitting there. I was just soaking in the sun. Why
Mhm.
do I feel so beat up? Well, it's usually because that ultraviolet light is hitting the skin and it's causing a little bit of increased reactive oxygen species. And so energy production drops. Now, normally, if we're getting out in the sun on a regular basis, our body will make more antioxidants to respond to that. It will upregulate. And so you might not notice that effect if you're out in the sun regularly. There are a
Mm.
lot of outside sources that will increase oxidative stress. So anything that does that is going to result in a drop in energy production. So if we're focused on those three areas, oxidative stress, getting fuel to the cell, and proper hydration, then that actually unlocks a whole lot of stuff. And if we don't have good energy, we can just look at what's affecting the cellular engine and how could we make it work better. And there are things that can happen preventively, and there are things that we can do very proactively to be making a difference, as well as learning to understand the signals that are coming to us in the form of symptoms and trying to sort through all of that.
And how would like stress of everyday life play into that? Does that, fall into it as much as like, the stress from the sun or
Yeah, great question. Any sort of stress will increase that exhaust sort of backing up into the cellular engine. Now, I realize that I'm oversimplifying this just a little
Mhm.
bit, but when stress goes up, often it affects energy production.
Yeah.
And if we want to get really good results, we need to calm that inflammatory response and increase energy production. Keep our mitochondria producing as much energy as possible.
Absolutely. And you've talked about brain health as the hardware and then the skills that we're developing around that as our software. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, I several years ago really started doing a lot more work with business leaders. More and more people were finding out about the work that my team and I did, helping people with really serious conditions like Alzheimer's and
Yeah.
Parkinson's. And then that sort of branched into helping other people that just wanted to get their brains to a better place. And at some point along the way, I was talking to a business leader that said, man, I thought I just needed to keep going to classes to learn how to be more productive. I was
Yeah.
reading books on productivity. But when I got my brain to a better place, I was getting like 30 to 40% more stuff done because my processing speeds were better. I was able to focus and concentrate. My energy was really steady. And that was the moment where I realized, oh, this is like a hardware software situation. I bet everybody's had the experience of trying to load new software on an older computer or tablet or something like that. And it doesn't work very well. Everything is sluggish. And I think we need both good software and good hardware in life. Think of software as like the skills that you're developing, the classes that you go to, the books that you read. Learning the right skills truly matters. But if you're loading new software on crummy rundown hardware, you're never going to get optimal results. But if you're focused on your hardware, your brain health, and your whole physical system, and you have that operating as optimally as possible, then when you do the skills training, it's like 10 times the result. It's so much more effective. And once I realized that, I started more proactively thinking about it in those terms. It's kind of like the art side and the science side of the equation, or nature versus nurture. And
Yeah.
we need to manage both sides of that.
So, how would someone know if it was actually the hardware that they need to take a look at, aka their brain, versus the software or finding new, skills or reading new, books or finding new resources on just productivity alone?
Yeah. I think one of the best ways that people can do that is with objective measurements. For example, we use a test, a specific cognitive test that's computer based, and it's been administered over 20 million times in the last 2 decades. It's used at a lot of research institutions, and it's like a really fine-toothed comb looking at exactly how someone's brain is performing.
Mm.
And it's comparing the person to thousands, if not millions, of other people that are their age. And it gives us a really good sense of how things are going and what's optimal and what's not optimal. Another objective measure is to look at blood tests. There are a lot of things that will absolutely sink your ship when it comes to your brain health down the road. But people don't know about it because it takes years of deterioration and problems developing before they become obvious symptoms when it comes to your brain. With Alzheimer's disease, for example, a lot of people don't even realize that Alzheimer's is at work in the brain for 10 to 20 years before the symptoms even show up outwardly.
Wow.
And the decisions that lead to something like Alzheimer's disease often are made much earlier in life. There are a lot of lifestyle factors that over time will increase risk. And it's the compounded effect of all of those little things built up over time that get us in trouble. So if we can measure some things in blood tests very objectively, and even understand some genetic factors, then we can see the trajectory that we're on and maybe do some things that will prevent us from getting into a really bad spot. And along the way, we get to optimize health and have better results here and now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that blew me away was that this normal range in, typical blood tests at a doctor's office aren't necessarily as helpful, and it's just more kind of like an average versus like, yeah, there's actually so much more to it as to what it's indicating for you versus like, oh, what's, quote, normal, not healthy, but normal right now for our population.
Yeah, there's really two key principles there that I think are valuable to talk about. One is that it's very easy to confuse common with normal.
Yeah.
For example, obesity is common these days. It's
Yeah.
affecting like 70% of the US population is overweight or obese. That is
Yeah.
super common. But that's not normal. There are some
Right.
countries in the world where that is not the case. And
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember a time when that was absolutely not normal at all. That was very much the exception instead of the rule. So
Yeah.
don't mistake common for normal. And number two is the simple fact that where those ranges come from matters. And a lot of doctors that I've talked to don't even really understand where the lab values are derived from.
Yeah.
Basically, labs will take a large sample of people and they'll throw out the top 2.5% of the scores and the bottom 2.5% of the scores, and the remaining 95% is considered the normal range. which means if you're testing a population that is getting sicker and sicker, then it skews the range.
Yeah.
Back in the 1970s, if you looked at a common liver function test, ALT, then it would flag as high if it went over 25. And now it doesn't flag as high until it's upwards of about 40 on a lot of these tests. And that's because people's liver function is not as good as it was back in the 1970s. So the question isn't what's normal or am I normal? It's
Yeah.
what is optimal?
Yes.
So
Yes.
a quick analogy that might be kind of fun. Um, let's imagine that you lost one of your shoes. And somebody came to you and said, "Well, I've got an extra shoe. Here you go." And let's suppose that you wear a size 8 and they bring you a size 6 and you put on this size 6 shoe and you walk around all day and you're getting blisters and it doesn't feel comfortable. Can you imagine going to the shoe store saying, "Hey, this is just not working for me." And the shoe clerk looks at you and says, "I don't know what to tell you. It's a normal shoe size." It might not be optimal for you. And I feel very much the same way when it comes to lab values.
Yeah.
What is optimal and what is optimal for the individual is the question.
Right. Because it's so common to feel like something's off, know something's wrong in your body or in your brain or your mind. And then you go to the doctor, they run tests, and they're like, nope, everything's normal. You're fine. We'll see you later.
No doubt. And part of that is because they're looking at blood tests and they're falling into this trap of, oh, are you in the normal range?
Yeah.
And you might be at the very bottom of the normal range and having symptoms. And so that's one part of the problem. But the other part is that in a standard checkup, we're looking at a very, very narrow list of things.
Yeah.
Those tests would do a really good job of helping a clinician know if maybe you need to head to the hospital, or maybe you
Yeah.
need to have some tests for cancer, or you've got something going on in your blood counts. But you're generally not looking broadly at a lot of different hormones and nutrients and metabolic markers and inflammatory markers. And so when you look more broadly, you see things that you can't see otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just such a good reminder that there's so much more to it. And if you feel off or like feel like something's not right in your body for what you know, or like you, I love the word you use, what's optimal for you, dig in more, ask more questions, like advocate for yourself because that's only one tool and that particular provider may only be looking through one lens.
Yeah.
So when we talk about energy, and there's this kind of like common thing that happens to a lot of us where we wake up, maybe we have some energy, we go to work, we start our day, we go about doing whatever it is that we're doing. And in the afternoon, it just starts to tank and we are, low on energy, maybe we're sleepy. Why does that happen?
I think that's one of the most important questions that anyone could ask because it's affecting a lot of people. And
Yeah.
the answer is there are a lot of different reasons why that happens. But let's focus on the most common things. And you don't have to go to your doctor to figure some of this stuff out.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying for a minute that people don't need to have a really good primary care doctor. I think
Yeah.
everybody does. But
Yeah.
so much of this we can figure out. So one of the most common things that I see with people is that they are abusing caffeine. Many
Mm,
people don't recognize that caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours, which means 6 hours after you consume it, 50% of it's still in your body. And then 12 hours later, almost a quarter of it is still in the body. Well, caffeine blocks a receptor for adenosine. And adenosine is produced by the body at night when we're sleeping to help us be tired and to sleep really well. So
mm,
if you consume caffeine too late in the day, it's still lingering at night. And I hear people all the time say, "Yeah, I can totally have a cup of coffee right before bed and go right to sleep. Caffeine doesn't affect me."
uh-huh.
Well, there are reasons why that could be. You probably have an attention deficit issue. That's another story. But yeah, you can go to sleep, but that caffeine is still blocking adenosine receptors. And that means the body is building up adenosine all night long. The receptor side is blocked. And by the time the caffeine is metabolized, it's time to wake up. And guess what's waiting in the wings? all that adenosine. And as soon as the receptor site opens, wham, it just slams you and you feel exhausted from the start of the day. And so what do people do? Well, they visit their favorite coffee shop or they drink their favorite sugary soda that's loaded with caffeine or they take energy drinks. And then throughout the day, they run this spike crash kind of phenomenon where they're constantly fueling up with caffeine and then they rinse and repeat the cycle. So one simple step that has affected so many people that I've worked with over the years is just don't drink anything or consume caffeine in any way after about 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Mm.
That one thing can change energy levels for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Another common thing is blood sugar spikes and crashes. When you eat the standard American diet that's loaded with excess carbohydrates, blood sugar will rise very rapidly. And then, assuming that you have a pretty decent insulin response, it's going to come down rapidly. And when it comes down, a few things happen. One is it triggers a hunger hormone, ghrelin. And so you just feel ravenously hungry like an hour and a half or 2 hours after you ate that meal
Yeah.
or had that Snickers bar or whatever. So you feel like, oh, I'm crashing. I've got to eat again. And that's just a signal that you're hearing. Humans can live for many days. As long as they're hydrated, they can live for many days without consuming food. Our bodies are built to withstand starvation. So the signal is just that's a sound, but you don't have to listen to it. But it's
Yeah.
going to come if you have that blood sugar spike. Um, and then you also really kind of have alarm bells going off in the head. Intermittent anxiety is often triggered by crashing blood sugar. And you also tend to feel your energy slumping. So, one of the keys to steady your energy is to not have such sharp spikes. So, number one, eat real food. I sincerely believe that ultra processed food is the worst possible kind of experiment done on humans, and it's been a disaster. It has not served us very well. So, if it was made in a factory in the deep south and put in a box and stamped with a label that says that it can sit on the shelf for months and you can still consume it, that is not real food. It's had
Yeah.
the soluble fiber removed and that's why it is shelf stable. So
Yeah.
if you can find something that's in the form that you find it in nature, preferably without pesticides and herbicides covering it, then it's good for food. The more fiber something has, the more that would blunt the release of sugar. It's totally different to have a large salad and then eat a cookie than it is to eat the cookie in isolation because all of that fiber, especially if you're getting it first, blunts the release of the sugar, which sounds like permission to just eat all the cookies that you want as long as you have it with a salad. And that's not what I'm saying. But in general, if you're not having a lot of carbohydrate and you're prioritizing good protein intake, and the carbs that you're eating are coming from the rainbow of vegetables and modest amounts of fruit that are out there, that's really helpful for people. Never neglect fat either. Fat's been criminalized, but fat is very satiating. Fat triggers more leptin hormone that makes us feel full. Fat is kind of like burning coal. It's harder to ignite, but it will burn hot and steady. So if you had a breakfast of scrambled eggs and an avocado, for a lot of people, that gives them very steady energy all morning long. And you're not causing a massive insulin spike. You're not causing a massive glucose spike. And that levels things out. A lot of people crash because they go out to lunch and they go have Italian food or they eat pizza or they have a sandwich. And so yes, they're getting whatever toppings are on the sandwich, but they're getting a whole lot of bread,
Yeah.
which very quickly breaks down to sugar, and they'll get a spike and a crash. And an hour or two after they have lunch, they're slumping. And I think for most people, that's where the 3 o'clock slump comes from. So there's a couple of things. Maybe we can add to the list if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Dehydration is one of the
Mm.
top causes of fatigue among adults. Most of us just flat don't drink enough fluid.
Yeah.
And a good rule of thumb is half your body weight in ounces. Now, things are going to vary based on your level of activity and how hot it is, etc. But you want to be getting up using the bathroom like once every hour or two, and you want high urine output, and you want it to be basically colorless. If your urine is starting to get dark, you are well into dehydration, and that's going to have a big effect on your energy level. Getting back to the steamship analogy, you got to feed the guy shoveling the coal in.
Yeah.
And you've got to give him water, or he's going to sweat everything out and not have enough energy to produce. So those are some of the more common things. I'll add just one thing more to the list that's very modifiable. I think most people have heard that exercise is very important for brain health. Exercise causes the body to release a growth factor for brain cells called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Think of it like miracle grow for brain cells. Exercise improves blood flow, and you can't have a better brain if you don't have plenty of blood supply getting to that brain, delivering all of that oxygen that you need. So people know this, and people know that they feel better when they exercise consistently. But you know what a lot of people do that I think is a mistake? They get up, they do their morning workout, and then they go to the office and they sit all day long. And the
Yeah.
body is not meant to be static. And the longer that we sit, the more our sensitivity to sugar is disrupted, the more that things aren't circulating, our lymphatic system isn't working as well, and we need regular muscle contractions. So please keep the morning workout if that's your routine, or if you like to exercise in the evening, please do that. But make sure that you get up every hour or so, 90 minutes max, and move around. Go take a short walk for 3 minutes. Do some push ups, do jumping jacks, go take the stairs. I have an exercise bike in my office so that I can take exercise snacks regularly throughout the day. And you would be shocked at what it would do for your energy level to just move for 3 minutes about once an hour and just crank it out, do a sprint on a bike or run in place or whatever it is that you choose to do. That can have a significant difference on energy level.
I think it's so amazing how we so easily underestimate what just a little bit of something can do. We're like, oh, that won't do anything, or that won't make a difference, but it really does. Like, and I'm curious, like when you talk about that, like if you were to say, like, okay, I'm gonna work out for, an hour or 90 minutes in the morning, or every 30, 60, 90 minutes, whatever, throughout my day, I'm going to get up and do something for 5 minutes. Like, even if you didn't have that regular workout, would those little increments add up to be enough to make you feel better?
Absolutely. There's even research on it that if you are really exercising intensely for a few minutes every hour or so throughout the day, it's actually better in a lot of ways than doing that concentrated workout. Now, ideal is you do about a 30-minute high intensity workout in the morning,
Mhm.
alternating between strength training and cardiovascular training, and then you have some exercise snacks throughout the day. But overall, I love what my business partner, who's our chief medical officer at Mind for All Seasons, what he says about exercise. Because people ask him all the time, Randy, what's the very best exercise to do? And he says, whatever you will stick with consistently.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
I think that's a great answer. So if you like walking, do more of it. If you like playing tennis, do more of it. But the human system was meant to move.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our listeners here have heard people say sitting is the new smoking. And it really is.
Yeah.
So just get up and move.
Yeah. And it's funny to me too how like if you are living with chronic pain or chronic illnesses, they'll, prescribe you these things of like take breaks, step away, get up every 30 minutes, move, stretch throughout the day, take breaks from long car rides, like, right, like break things up and moderate and modify and all these things. And it always makes me think about how actually everybody can benefit from that. And like we should all be doing that. Like, why is that only prescribed once you've reached a point where like you can't function without it?
Yeah, to me, what you're describing is kind of a sick care sort of approach.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of us are just used to the idea that, well, you go about your life, and if you start having problems,
Yeah.
then you go talk to someone
Yeah.
and you get help with those problems.
Yeah.
Can I share a story it's a lesson that I learned in retrospect, but it was an experience I had when I was a kid, and I think it illustrates this point really well, Lindsay.
Yeah.
When I was somewhere around 8 years old, one of my brothers and I cobbled together our own little play fort because we had friends that had these forts in their backyard, and so we wanted it. And my dad looked at it and he said, "Oh no, there's no way that I'm going to let you go into that death trap. I'm sure there were nails sticking out and things like that." So he built us a play tower, and it was huge and it was impressive. And if anybody knows my dad, he doesn't go halfway with anything. So he built this play tower that had very tall swings. We're talking like 20-foot chains. So it was like going to the playground with the big kid swings. And it was so much fun. And I started standing on the seat of the swing and pumping up and down.
Hmm.
And I would get higher and higher and go to the point that there would be slack in the chains. And I would kind of pause and hang in midair, and whoom, it would pull me backward. And my
Wow.
heart would lurch. And it was like a trip to the amusement park without paying the entrance fee. I got to do it every day and it was fun. And I felt cool. I felt like this daredevil kid.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple of years, like frequently. And then
Yeah.
when I was about 10, one summer afternoon, I was on the backswing, standing up, going as high as I could get it, and one of those chains broke. And I went flying over the fence, landed on a log, did enough damage that I ended up being the kid walking around the neighborhood the rest of that summer with a big old foam neck brace on. And you know what? That's a way to wreck a really good summer. I was
Yeah.
that kid.
Yeah.
Now, what I didn't know every time I was riding that swing is that the chains at the top were rubbing against the eye bolt.
Mm.
My dad didn't anticipate how much wear and tear there could be on really big, thick chains. These were not little chains,
Yeah.
but they were rubbing, rubbing, rubbing. And over 2 years of abuse, little by little, that wore away until one day it snapped. Now, up to the moment that it snapped, I thought everything was fine. And my parents obviously weren't worried, or they would have done something about that.
Yeah.
And I realized that day that actually, I didn't realize it that day. I realized it as an adult in retrospect, largely
Yeah.
from the work that I do, but I realized that we hear people say things all the time like, "Oh, what you won't know, what you don't know won't hurt you." I learned
Yeah.
that day that what you don't know might kill you. And when
Yeah.
it comes to our health, there's actually all sorts of things that are affecting us. We just don't know about it. And
Yeah.
instead of waiting for the chain to snap, why don't
Mm.
we look closer? Why don't we inspect things and make simple changes now that have just as big an impact over time as the chain rubbing, but in a positive way? Let's not wait for things to fall apart. Let's be more proactive in our health. And unfortunately, I've heard people for years say, you can't get people, especially Americans, to be preventive when it comes to their health. And I have learned that that's absolutely bogus. I
Yeah.
have found that there are a lot of people that desperately want to change the trajectory. They want to have some sort of assurance that they are being proactive and that they're doing more to optimize their cognitive and mental health. People recognize that, yeah, the number one cause of death is birth. We know that the ride's going to end at some point, but people don't want it to end the way that so many millions of people are ending the ride with 10, 20, 30 years of chronic disease. People want to live well for as long as they can and have a nicer touchdown at the end of life. And I realize there are no guarantees, but the more proactive we are and the more educated we are about how these beautiful bodies of ours work, the more we can make simple decisions from day to day that truly change the trajectory that we're on. And I think that's inspiring for people. The more I see people talking about that and doing it, the more I see people waking up to the fact that, oh, you can inspire people to take control of their health.
Yeah.
So it's a great day. It's a new day when it comes to our health.
Mm. That's amazing. I love that outlook. And before I move to the next piece, when you talk about the food part of that, like the nutrition and like eating real food, you guys teach something called the veggie mash that
Mm.
I just blew me away. I was like, that's like the best version of like a multivitamin I've like ever heard. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that's a great way to like make that chain go in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. I'll preface it by saying that diet is both one of the most controversial topics that you could ever discuss
Yeah.
because you have a lot of tribalism with dietary approaches.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the most complex things. Part of why there's so much tribalism is that people are desperately looking for answers. And
Yeah.
when people find a dietary approach that turns something challenging around for themselves, they naturally want to share it. And I think a mistake that people make is assuming that there is one perfect diet for every human.
Yeah.
I think humans are far more complex than that. So
Hmm.
I do think the perfect diet doesn't use processed food. Whatever you're doing, you got to control sugar levels appropriately and not create a lot of insulin resistance. And you've got to promote really good energy.
Yeah.
But some people are sensitive to oxalates, some people are sensitive to lectins. Some people have genetic tendencies where if they don't get enough protein from animal sources in their diet, they really do poorly in most of those cases. So you got to sort through it in a personalized way.
Yeah.
With that preface, let's talk about a veggie mash. The bacteria in our gut feed largely on the fibers that we're consuming. And that comes from the fruits and vegetables that we eat. And it's important to eat a very diverse array of fruits and vegetables. Most Americans have a really limited scope of, especially veggies, that they'll put on the plate. I know some people that will only eat one type of vegetable, and that's it. I
Hmm.
think that gets us into trouble because
Mm.
all the diverse array of bacteria feed on different kinds of things.
Yeah.
Some bacteria in the gut only feed on just a really narrow window of things. And so if we're not eating broadly, then certain strains of bacteria are missing out. And so one of the things that our medical director learned in a fellowship that he did with a neuroinflammation expert was the concept of going to the grocery store and just going through the produce section and getting like one of everything. And the way that some people do a veggie mash is they just chop all of that stuff up and then take a little bit of each thing and put it all together and then like put it in a smoothie or cook it and consume it or something like that. And you're right, it is like the ultimate multivitamin.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very helpful for people to just try to improve the diversity of foods that they're consuming. And you don't have to eat an entire serving of every little thing. You only need a little bit of a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually kind of fun. It's an adventure to find out what you like and what you don't like. It's okay not to like some things, but
Yeah.
I think that makes a difference for anybody in terms of gut health.
Yeah. That's super cool. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And what other things, other than like our energy, start to get affected when we start managing our brain health? You know, like I know you talk about like anxiety or brain fog or ADHD. Like, how are things like that or anything else affected and what else shows up?
Yeah, I'd like to encourage people to think of um, behavior as not only communication, but it's also an outward sign of an internal state.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
for example, a few months ago, I was at a grocery store, and the guy that was in front of me in line was just so rude to the
Mm,
checker. I mean, just abrupt, and it was completely unjustified. And I felt bad for the checker who was kind of looking wide-eyed, like, what did I even do here? This
oh,
person was just grumpy. And there was a point in my life where I would have thought, oh, what a jerk. Who treats people that way? I mean, you can do better. Let's be
yeah.
good humans here.
Yeah.
And I absolutely, I think it's important to show up and be the best self that we can possibly present to the world.
Yeah.
But I found myself watching that interaction just naturally thinking, oh, wow, I wonder why he's got low energy production in the frontal lobe.
Yeah.
Because the frontal lobe is our governor. It controls reasoning and planning and judgment and personality and our social filter. And I've worked with enough NFL athletes and other athletes that have played concussive sports or everyday Joes and Janes that got in car wrecks and had brain injuries that I know what happens when the frontal lobe has an injury that it hasn't healed from. You get people that go from zero to fighting mad at the drop of a hat, and people are terrified to even be around them because they don't know what's going to come out.
Yeah.
And that is a classic sign of low energy production in the front part of the brain, which tells us they've got chronic inflammation there. They have an insult to the brain that they've never healed from. And when we do the work to identify the root cause issues there and to help the immune system in the brain settle down and to help the frontal lobe start producing energy again, I watch those people totally change. I've literally seen people go from angry at the drop of a hat to calm and laughing and kind of having their old personality come back. I
Mhm.
saw a 70-year-old guy a few years ago who came to us because his wife had divorced him. I mean, wife of decades divorced him. Adult kids wouldn't talk to him. He was
Mm.
starting to have tremoring in his right hand. He was angry, he was aggressive, and earlier in life, he was everybody's friend. He was wildly successful financially as a land developer because he was so good with people, and now nobody wanted to talk to him. And when
Mm.
we dug through everything, the number one thing that stood out, on top of even some hormonal wonkiness that we found, was that he had mercury levels in the 99th percentile.
Oh,
Because
no.
when he became wealthy, he decided, I can eat whatever I want. And every day, most days, that was ahi tuna sushi. And he had a genetic issue that made it extra hard for him to clear
Oh,
mercury that he was exposed to. And little by little, over time, you talk about those little things that build up. Well, mercury built up for him to the
yeah.
point that he essentially had Mad Hatter's disease. And it took about 9 months of solid effort to slowly help his body eliminate that mercury. And I literally watched him go from a client that I was regretful that I took on because he accused me of all sorts of things. Anything that didn't go right was my fault. And I thought, why did I do this? And I
Mhm.
watched that change to him becoming just the wonderful, friendly, happy gentleman that he had been earlier in life. So learn to see those outward signs as a symptom. So you mentioned ADHD. Well, that's also kind of a less extreme version of low energy output in the frontal lobe. If the governor is not working, it's really hard to hold our thoughts in check. And so many people that we've worked with get diagnosed with adult onset ADHD. Like we've worked with PhDs that functioned at the highest possible level, and then suddenly it's taken them 3 times as long to do their work. And they're getting diagnosed with this ADHD. And when we dig through it, we find, oh, you had a car wreck 2 years ago. Post concussion syndrome kicks in 6 to 18 months after the fact. So they didn't even connect the dots. They got a brain injury that they haven't healed from. The front part of their brain is not making good energy. And so now the governor doesn't work and it doesn't hold the thoughts in check and allow people to concentrate. That was the real issue. And when we deal with it, oh, I can focus again. I can do my work.
Yeah.
Um, so that's over time, that's really changed my perspective on a lot of these different issues that people are facing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think just like understanding that there's another option, that it's possible to turn things around, I think can be really empowering. Because I can imagine as easy it is for on the other side to judge the person who may be lashing out or, not in their best space, that person willing to bet is also feeling a lot of shame and guilt over their own behavior, maybe wondering like, why can't I keep it together? Why can't I, focus? Why can't I do this as fast as I used to?
Absolutely. I don't think any of us as humans get up and look in the mirror and say, hey, you, let's get out there and wreck our lives.
Right.
But we are all one decision away from total disaster.
Yeah.
Any of us could totally mess things up for ourselves and others with one choice.
Yeah.
And one of the most significant blessings that I've received from doing the work that I've been doing all these years is greater empathy, greater understanding, greater patience, greater ability to recognize that what people feel is not necessarily who they are. And I think a lot of people confuse what they're feeling and experiencing with who they are. They're different things. Feelings are truly a physical reality. We
Yeah.
feel because we have neurotransmitters and we have hormones and we have experiences that affect us and trigger different things. But that doesn't always mean that we can trust those feelings, especially if there's some sort of injury and things aren't working the way that they really need to. And I think it's important that people not confuse their identity with what they happen to be feeling in the moment.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful too, because especially when you look at like when, illness does manifest when the chain breaks, right?
Hmm.
I loved that story. It's just you can realize all of a sudden that it's caught up with you, but it's not who you are. And then I think sometimes you can kind of like identify with that and then fall back into that and be like, well, I guess this is where I am. I guess this is what I just have to deal with now versus stepping into that empowerment that we're talking about of like, no, there's an option. There's a way. Like you can actually turn this around.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, your comments, Lindsay, remind me of something on the art side of the equation.
Mm.
I feel like at A Mind for All Seasons, we're always trying to balance art and science. And the
Yeah.
art side of the equation is kind of the interpersonal side of the equation. And the science side is, digging into neuroscience and physiology and how the body works. And on the art side of the equation, when it comes to emotion, I think a lot of people have an unhealthy relationship with emotion.
Mm,
Most people are
yeah.
busy categorizing and judging emotion for themselves and others.
Yeah.
It's looking at it and first labeling, is this good emotion or is this bad emotion? And then we make judgmental and shaming statements of ourselves and others. So we start feeling anxious and we look at it and we say, oh my gosh, I shouldn't even be feeling this way. What's wrong? This is not a problem.
Um,
Well, that just makes it worse. That adds fuel to the fire. And instead of categorizing and judging emotion, I think it's more helpful to observe and label emotion.
yes.
Oh, I notice that I'm feeling tense. My shoulders are tightening up. I've got a knot in my back. I'm gritting my teeth. Oh, I'm feeling anxious. What's going on? Or when we talk to others and we say, you seem frustrated. You want to
Hmm.
talk about it? That's totally different than, now just calm down. Everything's going
Right.
to be fine, which only causes most of us to escalate. And yet it happens all the time. So I think most of us can do a better job with ourselves and others, allowing people to have the very normal human experience of feeling, whatever
Yeah.
it is. And we don't have to love what we're feeling,
Yeah.
but the fact that we're feeling it just makes us human. And it's okay to be human.
Absolutely. So well said. And, it's just like that analogy of like holding the beach ball underwater, right? Like the more you try to like force it down and, oh, it's not going to happen, or I'm going to muscle through, I'm going to push through. I feel like I relate to that because I did that for years, right? I'm like, oh, I'll just, push through. I can mind over matter it, which mind has a lot of power, but forcing it away versus actually like taking a look at it is, it just makes all the difference. And I've even, sometimes enjoyed almost addressing an emotion or a feeling almost as if it's somebody else. Like, oh, hey, anxiety. Like, what's going on? What do you need today? Like, how are you feeling? Like, what are you looking for?
Hmm. Yeah, I think people are trying to eliminate things
Yeah.
that they perceive as negative, like
Yeah.
anxiety. And
Yeah.
I think success is not about just eliminating anxiety. We have an anxious response for a reason as humans.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll save your life.
Yeah.
So I think the goal is to have a really good relationship with anxiety and to have a healthy anxiety response.
Yes.
And some of that has to do with intentional counterbalancing. Um, but one of the things that we talk about as far as foundations of really good health, things that you can't medicate or supplement your way out of,
Yeah.
is stress management. And I don't think people in general do enough to actively manage stress.
Right.
When stress goes up, the counterbalance for stress needs to go up.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times in my life I've looked in the mirror and said, "Oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff going on. What are you doing to intentionally counterbalance this?" And the answer is nothing, because it feels like I'm just adding more to the plate. And my approach is a little bit like being on a rutted road and thinking that it's going to be a better ride if I just speed up and try to power through it. And
Yeah.
reality is, no, maybe I need to slow down a little bit and prioritize recovery a little bit and take some time to counterbalance. And that can be as simple as doing some breathing exercises or going for a walk or talking to a friend, or I mean, the list is long, but those things truly make a difference for us.
Yeah, absolutely. We need like that emergency brake when everything starts revving up to just, okay, let me just slow down for a minute and be intentional about what I'm going to do moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right. So to kind of wrap this up, we first identify the factors contributing to that energy level and where we're at. Like, why are we low on energy? We start to identify like what's going on. Why am I struggling with my productivity? And then we incorporate those strategies for balancing the stress, kind of turning that volume down. I liked how you said it earlier, like calming things down and supporting our brain function and our cognitive levels. And then we begin small daily habits to influence that health for our mind, for our brain, for our body, so that we can feel better and be empowered again. And you've walked us through step by step how to do that in such a beautiful way. And this has been such a gift of a conversation that you're sharing with us. And I know you also have another gift for the listeners if you want to share that.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. If I could just kind of sum up an overall approach, it would be if you want to have better cognitive and mental health and better health in general, it's important to measure
Yeah.
and learn and apply and adjust. And what that means is you measure something and you're always limited by the degree to which you measure. So um, take metabolic health, for example. How your clothes fit is a sort of measurement. It's an observation.
Yeah.
Stepping on a scale is a little bit more fine-tuned. Um, Measuring your fasting blood sugar, and that happens in a standard checkup. Oh, that's a little bit deeper level. Understanding your fasting insulin level and your A1C, how much sugar is bound to a red blood cell. Oh, now we're measuring at a finer level. So the more that we can measure and the more data that we have, then the closer the observations are, the more we can make decisions. And then we learn what the very best research and understanding can tell us about those factors. And we apply what we learn. And then we measure again and we make adjustments. And so, to whatever degree you measure and learn about it, and then apply those things in your life, and then make adjustments, you're going to get better and better and better results. So, this is a framework that we use a lot with people that we serve in A Mind for All Seasons. And we work with thousands of people all across the country. And one of the ways that we do that is through an online membership. We are on a mission to save millions of people's brains from going in a very destructive path and to help people really do their art and their craft, whatever it is that's important to them, what fires them up to show up in life. We know that if people have better hardware and really good skills, that they're going to be better at contributing to the world. And so we created a membership that provides a lot of education. It provides a lot of online office hours where people can just log in. They can talk to me. They can talk to our medical director. They can talk to other members of the team multiple times a week. We've got a weekly master class that we do where we take a deep dive on a topic. Lots of tools and resources, access to get lab work done, access to telemedicine consults. So it's kind of like the access point to learn about things related to cognitive and mental health. Now, the membership itself is a little bit like having a Costco membership. It gives you access to a lot of other stuff. And some people go to Costco and buy a car or a vacation, and some people buy a few vegetables.
Yeah.
The AmFast membership site is a little bit like that. And so we want to make it really affordable, really accessible to people. So it's $25 a month to have access to all that education and even live interactions with me and my team.
Mhm.
And for listeners of your podcast, Lindsay, we're inviting them to get a free 30-day trial of an AmFast membership. So all you have to do is go to amindforallseasons.com/join and enter the code word PEACE, PEACE. And if you do that, you'll get to try out an AmFast membership for free for 30 days. And then if you decide to keep going, it's $25 a month to have access to a lot of high level education so that you can learn the things that you need to know to really, in a personalized way, optimize your cognitive and mental health.
Thank you so much for that. And I can just vouch for the membership because I'm a part of it. There's so much knowledge in there. Like I have not even gotten through all of it. And I've already just learned so much. And like what you're getting for the value you're paying, like it's absolutely insane. So I completely recommend it if you're looking for that, really just to take care of the health of your brain and your mind and your body. It's the just the best place to start.
Thank you, Lindsay. And it's awesome to have you as an AmFast member and contributing in the community. And we love interacting with you there.
Thank you. So, just to wrap up, I know you've shared so many amazing things and shared a great gift with us. But if anyone listening is feeling overwhelmed or not sure where to start, what is the one thing that you want them to go do right after listening to this, or the one thing you want them to remember?
Hmm, that's a great question. I think the one thing that people could do at this point is to just go find some quiet time alone
Mm,
and take a few minutes, do a little bit of deep breathing, get centered, and then just ask yourself, if I was to do one thing that I already know about to have just a little bit better cognitive and mental health, or to apply something that I heard on this podcast, or something that I know would make a difference for me, what would that be? And just sit with that.
yeah.
Because I think most of us already know things that will make a difference. We just haven't committed to doing it. And whatever that thing is, do it today. A lot of people are chasing the motivation mirage. They're waiting to be motivated to do something, especially when it comes to like the holiday season. People are like, "Oh, I'll do it in the new year." And people
Yeah.
get all fired up about these specific times. They think it's going to bring magical motivation. The word motivation comes from motivate. And one of the definitions of motivate is to move. Motivation comes when you're in motion.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is take one little tiny step and start moving forward and keep that going, and you'll have some momentum and things will build over time. So I think if people would just go sit with it, they already know what they need to do. They just need to take that first step.
Amazing. Thank you. And just I can't say it enough, like not underestimating the power of just a little bit. And even on the hard days or the difficult days, doing a little bit and keeping a routine, like modifying that or moderating it to keep that going helps you so much more than stopping. Because it just goes back to what you said earlier of like that atrophy of like if you just do nothing, then you're going in the wrong direction actively.
Yeah, it's true. And I actually, one of the things that will help people if they're doing that one thing is to just get a little 3x5 card and write that one thing on it and stick it on your mirror or someplace where you're going to see it every day. And every day that you do that one thing, regardless of when in the day you do it,
Yeah.
then just make an X on that day and then do it again the next day. And if you're looking at that day after day and you get a streak going, it's going to be really hard to break the streak. And it
Yeah.
could be something that takes you 2 minutes to do, but you'll have
Yeah.
some momentum. And I promise you that will start you moving forward and it will change your life because you can build on those steps.
Mm. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your wisdom today, really empowering us that we have a choice. There's options, there's things that we can do to turn things around. We don't just have to accept whatever has happened that makes us feel like we're set back from where we want to be.
My pleasure. It's been great to have the conversation with you, Lindsay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for braving the inside of your mind with me. The better we understand ourselves, the more deeply we understand the world, and as our awareness grows, life just gets better and better. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review and share this with anyone else you think could benefit from listening. A quick reminder that the content shared in this podcast is for informational purposes only. I am not a licensed therapist, and the discussions here are not a substitute for professional advice. If you're dealing with a specific issue or need personalized guidance, please consult with a qualified professional. Your well-being is important, and this podcast is simply a platform for sharing insights and experiences. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Until next time.